Muslim woman attacked with knife in New York in Islamophobic attack. Islamic Center of Rochester concerned over recent threat. Palestine MP calls for punishing Israel for crimes against women. U.S. bans Chinese telecom devices, citing national security. Iran asks for U.S. to be kicked out of World Cup and suspended for 10 games. Scientists revive zombie virus in the Siberian permafrost after 50,000 years. From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. New York City police are searching for a man who attacked a Muslim woman and an intervening bystander on a Manhattan subway last week. The incident is being investigated as a hate crime. The attack occurred on an 8th Avenue-bound L train on Tuesday at around 10:30 p.m., police said. They said the suspect kept staring at the 28-year-old woman, who was a victim from multiple stations. As she ignored him, he moved closer and closer until he was directly in front of her. The suspect then punched and slashed the victim in the face, according to schoolteacher John Catania, who stepped in. Catania also got punched and slashed with a blade by the suspect. He told the New York Daily News, "A waterfall of blood came down from my neck." The suspect took off at Union Square Station, Catania said. He and the Muslim woman were taken to Bellevue Hospital for treatment. Muslim leaders and a local police chief held a town hall meeting on Friday to address a recent threat to the Islamic Center of Rochester in New York. On Monday, a board member received a violent, threatening voicemail. Authorities said 53-year-old William Putman left the message, threatening to kill the board member and others at the center. Putman was arrested and charged with a hate crime and making a terroristic threat, along with federal charges. Zaka Ansari, the Islamic Center's president, led a town hall meeting Friday in response to the threat, saying safety is a top priority. The center includes a school and more than 3,000 members worship there. Ansari said officials are purchasing a security system so the building can be locked down like other schools. Many members of the mosque expressed concern for their children, and some believe the threat is a reason to revisit gun control. A New York Times analysis of more than 700 armed demonstrations since 2020 has found that in about 77% of protests, people openly carrying guns represented right-wing views. In June, armed demonstrations across the United States amounted to nearly one a day. Men with guns interrupted a Juneteenth festival in Franklin, Tennessee. And there were rallies in support of gun rights in Delaware and abortion rights in Georgia. This month, armed protesters appeared outside an election center in Phoenix, hurling baseless accusations that the election for governor had been stolen. The report said openly carrying a gun in public is no longer just an exercise in self-defense. Increasingly, it is a soapbox for elevating one's voice and silencing someone else's. On Saturday evening, former President Donald Trump issued another statement on his meeting with white nationalist and far-right activist Nick Fuentes. Trump again refused to denounce Fuentes' racism and anti-Semitism. The ex-president's dinner with Fuentes and rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, has already become an issue in the 2024 presidential campaign. It could play a role in determining the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. Trump's former ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, condemned him dining with what he called human scum. Trump has received harsh criticism from various quarters, as reported by the Washington Post, the New York Times, Politico, and NBC News. Washington, D.C.'s Imam Abdul Alim Musa has died. On Friday, hundreds of Muslims attended his funeral prayers held at Washington National Cemetery in Maryland. Musa, formerly known as Clarence Reams, was a founder and director of the As-Sabiqun Mosque. During the Civil Rights era, Musa took refuge in Algeria along with other self-exiled leaders of the Black Panther movement. He was an associate of H. Rap Brown, later known as Imam Jamil Al-Amin. Although a Sunni, Musa publicly expressed his support for the Islamic Republic of Iran after the 1979 revolution. Researchers documented 13 never-before-seen viruses that have been lying dormant, frozen in thick ice over tens of thousands of years. As the world continues to warm up, vast areas of permafrost are rapidly melting. That has caused the release of material trapped for up to 1 million years, including microbes that have been lying dormant. To study these emerging microbes, the French National Center for Scientific Research has revived a number of what have been called zombie viruses from the Siberian permafrost. That includes one microbe thought to be nearly 50,000 years old. The research team, led by microbiologist Jean-Marie, says these ancient viruses are potentially a significant threat to public health. They believe further study needs to be done to assess the danger that these infectious agents could pose as the permafrost melts. Researchers warn it may just be the tip of the iceberg. U.S. bans Chinese telecom devices, citing national security. Details after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, says it is banning telecommunications and video surveillance equipment from prominent Chinese brands. That includes Huawei and ZTE, citing an unacceptable risk to national security. The 5-member FCC voted unanimously to adopt new rules blocking the importation or sale of the targeted products. FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr said the move had broad bipartisan backing among the U.S. congressional leadership. U.S. security officials have warned equipment from Chinese brands could be used to interfere with 5G wireless networks and collect sensitive information. The ban is the latest move to keep U.S. networks secure by identifying and prohibiting devices deemed to be security threats, the FCC said. The European Parliament on Thursday condemned Qatari authorities for alleged human rights abuses. It urged FIFA and Qatar to compensate for widespread human rights abuses that migrant workers have endured while building the 2022 World Cup infrastructure. The European Parliament acknowledged significant labor reforms implemented by Qatar. Yet Qatar has failed to compensate for the widespread wage abuse since FIFA selected the country as its World Cup host in 2010. The European Union resolution is designed to pressure Qatari authorities to conduct thorough investigations into all reported incidents where a migrant worker has died. It urges Qatar to provide restitution to the families of those whose deaths are determined to have been caused by unsafe working conditions. The adopted resolution also criticizes Qatar's treatment of the LGBTQ+ community and women. Iranian state media has called for the U.S. to be kicked out of the 2022 World Cup. The call came after the United States Soccer Federation changed Iran's flag on its social media platforms to show support for protesters in Iran. The federation temporarily displayed Iran's national flag on its official Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts without the emblem of the Islamic Republic. A now-deleted graphic of the Group B standings posted on Saturday displayed the Iranian flag bearing only its green, white, and red colors. U.S. Soccer told CNN on Sunday it wanted to change the official flag for 24 hours to show support for the women in Iran fighting for basic human rights. The organization said it always planned to go back to the original flag. A spokesperson for the U.S. State Department told CNN it did not coordinate with U.S. Soccer on the flag change. Palestinian Member of Parliament Huda Naim called for the international community to punish the Israeli occupation for its crimes against Palestinian women. Her call came on International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. The day is marked annually on November 25th and is dedicated to spreading awareness about violence against women. Naim said Israeli crimes and violence against Palestinian women are represented in killing, detention, deportation, siege, torture, and depravity. Naim called for protecting Palestinian women from the systematic Israeli practices against them. She also called for taking practical measures to guarantee Palestinian women's freedom and ensuring they obtain their rights per international law and conventions. Belgian police used water cannons and tear gas to disperse crowds who caused havoc in the center of Brussels on Sunday after Morocco's shocking World Cup win. Morocco's victory was a major upset and was celebrated enthusiastically by fans with Moroccan roots in many Belgian and Dutch cities. Police sealed off parts of the city center following violence during and after Morocco's 2-0 win over Belgium. Dozens of rioters overturned and torched a car, set electric scooters on fire, and pelted cars with bricks, according to official reports. Police spokeswoman Ilse van der Keer said some fans were armed with sticks and a journalist was injured in the face by fireworks. Protesters in China took to the streets in more than a dozen cities on Sunday, calling for President Xi Jinping's ouster in anger over strict anti-virus lockdowns. It's the biggest challenge to the Communist Party's rule in decades, according to media reports and video footage from social media posts. In Shanghai, riot police used pepper spray to disperse protesters who called for an end to one-party rule. Hours later, people gathered again at the same spot, the Associated Press reports. Protesters gathered for a second day on Aramki Road in Shanghai as large numbers of police swept them back with linked arms. In Beijing, a crowd of at least 100 chanted, "We want freedom, equality, democracy, rule of law," in a video clip posted on Twitter. The protests began in Urumqi, Xinjiang, where 10 people died in a fire being blamed on COVID restrictions. During Xinjiang's lockdown, Uyghur residents claimed their doors were chained shut while there was no food delivery. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes. If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour, if we could find a way to get inside each other's minds, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adamville because it makes me happy. What? No.
And here's Adam and here's Anissa.
Adam is and his sister.
Adam is a boy and he is very smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. It's time for in-depth analysis segment. Let's watch.
Thank you, Hannah. And now we move to a discussion of the G20, the latest gathering of the G20 nations, which was held in Indonesia. What came out of the G20? What were some of the issues leading up to it? Who was there? Who wasn't there? Why weren't they there? What will this G20 meeting, what impact will it have on the world at large? Let's dive in. To discuss this, I want to bring on our special guest, Dr. Guy Burton, who is an adjunct professor of international affairs at the Brussels School of Governance. Dr. Burton, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So, Dr. Burton, let's start with a relatively simplistic question, but many people may not know this. What is the G20? Can you tell us a bit about its history, its membership, its purpose?
Sure. So the G20 is a group of 20 countries that get together primarily to talk about economic and financial issues. It was formed in 1999, just after the financial crisis, which happened in 1998, in the wake of Russia and Asia. And that was an opportunity to bring those countries together. But it really got major purchase after 2009, with the great financial crisis that happened, in the wake of the Lehman Brothers collapse of 2008. And at that point, from 2009, you started to have very regular, annual meetings between the heads of governments. And those have been going on every year. So the focus is very much about economic and financial issues, and the 20 countries that make it up, do constitute quite a sizable proportion of the world. They make up about 65% of the global population, as well as over 80% of global GDP. So these countries matter.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Burton, then, so tell us, what were some of the issues of concern leading into this G20? Global issues, economic issues, financial issues. What were some of the things that people were expecting the G20 to address or be impacted by leading into this meeting?
Sure. So it's primarily an economic talk shop, sort of talking about trying to coordinate or at least, find ways that the global economy can be maintained. Now, of course, there are wider issues going on. This year we've had Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has created problems when it came to sort of energy supplies as well as food supplies, which have seen sort of the price of those commodities go up. So we've seen rising cost of living as a result. So that alongside the recovery from the post-pandemic period, these have all been things that have sort of filtered in. Plus, of course, this summit was taking place at the same time as COP27, so the climate change summit that's taking place in Egypt.
Absolutely. So tell us a bit about who was there and who wasn't there at this G20 and why.
Yeah. So, as I said, you have mostly all of the heads of government coming from those countries. However, there were two notable exceptions. Jair Bolsonaro, the outgoing president from Brazil, but perhaps more notably, Vladimir Putin from Russia. He wasn't present. At some point early on in the week, his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov was around, but he left before the final declaration was made.
So, why is that? I mean, is it, at the end of the day, regardless of what's happening in Ukraine, he is a member of the G20. Were they worried about being outvoted, embarrassed? What do you think the reason was why they didn't show for any extended amount of time?
And I think that's very much the case. I think, Putin's decision not to be present was probably because he was going to get hit hard on the issue of Ukraine. The last time we had something similar to this was back in 2014 when Putin went, invaded in Crimea. And at the time, he felt very much embarrassed by the fact that he was sort of put on the sidelines. So I think he just didn't want to go through this again.
Understood. Now, another person who was there was Xi Jinping from China. President Biden obviously attended in person as well, and they had a meeting that I understand ran somewhat long. Can you tell us about that meeting? What came out of that? Anything that surprised you?
Sure. So that meeting took place just before all of the G20. And it was very important for at least starting a conversation between these two leaders. It's the first time they've actually met. Biden's been president now for nearly 2 years. Xi Jinping has just, sort of taken a third term, unprecedented in Chinese history, because normally they're gone after two terms. So this is the first time they've actually met in person. Keep in mind as well that Xi has not been traveling since the pandemic began. So this was one of a very notable sort of, foreign visit for him. In terms of what happens between the two of them, the readouts, it looks like they talked about Taiwan, although there were different interpretations of what that meant. Similarly, they have different positions when it comes to the issue of Ukraine as well. But really, the point that they're actually talking, I think, is notable. And certainly people were watching it because it sort of has maybe had implications for the global economy, soothing any kind of fears and nervousness in the markets.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, in terms of the ending of the meeting and the declaration that was released, what were the major results of that?
Sure. So, of course, G20 is primarily about economic and financial issues. Although, of course, the issue of Ukraine does loom large, and because as I flagged up, it has had repercussions in relation to energy and food. That has meant that they did have to reference it. They didn't achieve what the host of the G20 summit, the Indonesian president Jokowi, wanted, which was to find a solution to the problem. That wasn't going to happen. Although what they did in the declaration was to just reiterate the points that they've made elsewhere. Now, there is quite a wide range of opinion amongst these countries as to what the reaction should be towards Russia's invasion. But it was a pretty strident, strong message saying that talking about aggression. So in that sense, I think the Western countries very much got their position across there. But they did acknowledge in the declaration that there were different views and different viewpoints relating to the Ukraine issue.
So speaking of that issue, going forward, do you think the G20 will stay the G20, or do you think Russia might be excluded, as happened with the smaller group of nations? Do you expect this to stay intact despite what's happening in Ukraine?
Unlikely. I mean, this is a group of, I think the nature of the G20 is that you are always going to have differences. And I think those are becoming more and more visible. Of course, keep in mind that this isn't a decision-making body as such. There is no kind of institutions that operate between these summits. It's just an opportunity for leaders to come together and to talk. Of course, there's going to be differences of opinion, but the point is that it is a regular, ongoing process. I don't think it's going to solve problems, but at least the more that you are talking to people, communicating, I think that makes a difference.
Another question for you, Dr. Burton. There was an interesting, some might say awkward exchange between the Chinese president and Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau on the sidelines of the G20. Is that people making a big deal out of nothing, or was there really something unusual about that interaction? Tell us about it.
Yeah. So what happened there was that some of the media in the media pool caught Xi Jinping sort of protesting to Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, that the Canadians were leaking details from the meetings that they were having. Now, I think this is meant to embarrass the Canadians, and there has been some discussion as to whether this was, the Chinese flexing their muscles somewhat and picking on the Canadians because they are the least likely to be able to hit back on this. But I think it's also worth keeping in mind that these sort of things do happen from time to time. If you are going to allow cameras into a meeting where interactions are taking place, it's likely that you are going to pick these kind of things up. This is just, human dynamics, human interactions. I think that's what maybe stands out for people, is that, we're so used to seeing scripted, stated dialogues and statements that when we sort of catch them on the sidelines, it really maybe magnifies things somewhat.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Burton, I want to thank you so much for giving us this recap, sharing your perspective. These developments, economic and otherwise, will continue to unfold in the coming months. So we look forward to having you back to learn more about what is going on in the world, God willing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll send it back to you, Hannah.
Thank you. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.